I'd like to introduce Roger, please. Hearing already this morning about inspiration from other places, a little bit of inspiration there from India, the church in India. Roger is one of the most well-connected men that I know. And Roger leads the Gather movement, which has the whole purpose of connecting people that are caring for their city in the way that Jeff has described, Christian unity groups, and has things to share with us that we might learn from what God's already doing in other places. So over to you. There's your clicker.
Thank you. Hey, good morning. Nice to be here. I'm from Manchester. Came for the sun. We don't see a lot of this. It's good to be in Oxford. From the photograph, I'm not quite sure what needs to be renewed, but it's nice, isn't it? Yeah, it is nice. I went around Christchurch College yesterday, and wow, okay, bit of history there. Yeah, I sent pictures to my grandchildren, Harry Potter and all that, so they connect with me now, so that's good. And what do you love about Oxford? The people? Diversity, yeah, very diverse, isn't it? The walks? What, around the town or just out? And the river? You got a river as well, haven't you? 2 rivers. Ooh, how many rivers have you got?
Well, there are 2 names at least, but
Are
there are lots of rivers.
Wow. We've got the Ship Canal. I'm not swimming in that. Other things you love, come on.
Green spaces.
Greens, yeah, beautiful green spaces. Cycling. Yeah, there's lots of bikes around. Yeah, other things?
G&D's ice cream shop.
Oh yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, now we're getting to the real issue. Yeah, that was the biggest issue. Other things?
Ice cream shop in the market.
Okay. There's a theme here, isn't there? That's good. What?
Minis.
Sorry?
I love minis that they come from Oxford.
What's mini?
Yeah, they're made in
Oh,
Oxford.
car.
Yeah, mini skirt.
Okay. Okay.
Super proud.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that. Things you don't know. Wow, bit of education going on, isn't there? Yeah.
And hospitals as well.
Hospitals are good. Hey, this is I need to move. What don't you like? What could you change? If I could give you a magic wand, 10 years' time, I'd change. What would it be? Inequalities, yeah. You must have quite a big divide, mustn't you? 15-year life expectancy, right.
Music.
You change the music?
Oh, change.
Change. You don't like the music. What would you change?
Congestion.
The congestion, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Other things?
The housing and how people struggle
Yeah.
with housing.
Yeah, big issue, isn't it? People trying to find a house for the first time, or yeah. Other things?
I want the people who are making decisions about Oxford, like the roads, the congestion charts, all of these things, to live in Oxford.
Okay. Yeah. Do they talk to the people of Oxford about it? No.
They say that they're talking
A consultation. Yeah. Yeah. There may be people, of course, who work for the Borough Council here. Well done. Let's not turn this into a council meeting. Other things you like to change?
Invisible barriers.
Homelessness? You have homelessness in Oxford?
Yes. I know.
Wow. Okay. What else?
Intellectual snobbery.
Intellectual snobbery. Okay. Yeah, you get that in some university places, don't you, actually? Yeah.
You get that in Manchester.
Sorry?
You get that in Manchester.
No, we're thick, really. There's a couple of universities. But it's not dominated by university like Oxford is, like Cambridge is, like Durham is. I mean, Lincoln's increasingly becoming dominated, isn't it? But yeah, things you like to change.
I would like to, having you just said about university,
Yeah.
I would like for all the people in the system, like Oxford, to be known for education for all, not just for
Okay.
the university, but actually
All.
across the board, secondary schools, primary schools, to be
Right.
excellent, because there are some that are not, and there are children who are really struggling
Yeah.
in school literate. Yeah.
Right.
For our city to be known internationally for education and actually
Right.
not to be everyone's experience.
Yeah.
Preach yourself. Probably do a few.
My daughter teaches in Runcorn, and it's in the bottom 40 of schools in the country. Yeah. 86% pupil premium, and it's social breakdown, actually. Just social breakdown, utter social breakdown. She's dealing with 5 police reports at the moment. Just a little primary school. That's all it is. Anyway, I love talking about place, actually. I think place is really important. And I love combining, looking at places, comparing places, why some places work and others don't. We've got a government expert on cities who gives us his time free of charge. He's a wonderful man, God bless him. And he goes into places with us to look at what makes a place, and the decisions that may have been made historically or geographically, or these affect how you view a place. So if you go to Sunderland, there's a phrase in Sunderland: "Nothing good happens here." So when you built 50% of the world's shipping at one point, what do you do when the only thing you build is a Nissan car, and that looks pretty ropey at the moment? Nothing good happens here. So guess what happens in Sunderland?
Nothing good happens here.
You kind of almost speak things over places, don't you? And then you live what is spoken. And the Bible and place, if you read it through place, is really interesting, I think. And it's one of those sort of areas you just never think to read it through. But when you think about it, it's all about place, actually. From Babylon, Nineveh, not great starts really in city exploration, but obviously to Jerusalem, which is meant to be the shining example of what a city should be. Not always Jerusalem was like that. And then in Paul's travels, he went from city to city, didn't he? He went from place to place, from Ephesus, Corinth, and Rome. And then you get this incredible picture of this new place which is being created by God, this new Jerusalem for the future. And then you get some very powerful statements, like in Jeremiah, where it says, "Bless the place to which I've called you, the very place which has enslaved you, the very place that you do not want to be. Bless it. And if it prospers, you will prosper." I just wonder the next 10 years in many places we say, well, Lord, let the church prosper over the next 10 years. I'm just not quite sure it's the right... It's a good sentiment to have, by the way. But actually let this place prosper. And if it prospers, we prosper. Love the place to which you're called. Jonah didn't have a great love for Nineveh, did he? He had to be sort of kind of made to find his way there. And I just love it really, because he just didn't like the place at all. And he's really annoyed that they've repented, basically. And he goes up and sits under it, his tree or whatever, and goes, I knew you'd do this. I knew you're such a loving, compassionate God that you forgive him. And he's really annoyed. And God says to him, should I not have compassion on that great city? There's something about the massive humanity coming together in one place that God has a particular heart for. And then when Jesus sees the city, he weeps over it, of course, and then we look forward to a new city, don't we? Praise God. There's some key theological themes, I think, that what this conversation is about, and is happening all over the world, by the way, at the moment, is firstly unity in God bringing all things together. In Ephesians in particular, this is very strong, of course, the bringing together of all things. Christ has come to gather it in. As Abraham Kuyper says, the Dutch theologian, there's not one square inch over the whole of human existence over which Christ does not declare mine. I will have it all. I'll have your road system. I'll have your council. I'll even have your potholes. That'd be, please Lord, to come back. I'll have your education. I'll have social justice. I'll have you. I'll have your church. I'll have it all. The priority of relationship, land and place. Relationship, of course, is just fundamental to the gospel. You know, love the Lord your God, love your neighbour as yourself. It's the very core of everything. And actually, it's the very core of how everything works. You know, if relationships are good in the family, they work. If they're good in a marriage, they work. And if they're not, they don't. And if they're good in a city works better. I'm a great believer that friends can change a place, actually. A bunch of friends together who trust each other, really trust, got each other's backs, you know, even when it's difficult and hard and you misunderstand each other. And so I had one leader say to me, how can you work with people that you have differences with? You see, it's very, you know, how can you work with people you have major differences with? Disagreements. I said, Martin, are you married? I knew he was married, and I knew there was a fair amount of difference in that relationship, I'll tell you now. It's just not how things work, is it? Sorry, that's how you grow. That's how you grow. Now, that's not to minimise the differences, and there are, you know, massive theological things that we worry about. But to be honest, to end sex trafficking across Greater Manchester, I don't care what your theology is. I really don't care. I'll work with you. I think it's about holiness in the new community, the sense that somehow somebody has got to begin to live this as the dream of what will be. You know, some marriages have got to do some hard yards to be able to live something. Families have got to be able to create something. Churches have got to be able to create communities that are welcoming and somehow have a kind of a moral sense about them that, you know, they're not perfect, but we're at least trying to get there, rather than go the other way. There's a kingdom theology of the transformed city. There is injustice, of course, the poor, the widow, and the orphan, and the church always turns and must turn its attention to them. Do you feel for the place? In Birmingham, in the 1800s, of course, in industrialisation, they put up the 2 up, 2 down, and utter poverty. I mean, no sanitation, no gas, no water, nothing. They just rammed them into these houses. They were food for the factories. And then 2 men came together, 2 pastors and a mayor, and they began to come up with a phrase called civic gospel. A town is a solemn organism through which shall flow and in which shall be shaped all the highest, loftiest, truest ends of man's moral nature. It doesn't quite work as a vision statement today, but it is Victorian. But it is said of these 3 men after the end of their ministry, there was a higher ethical standard in civic life, there was the extension of the vote, free school places, water and gas access, sewers were constructed, new housing, death rate was halved, high conversion rate and church growth. They left the city, it was said of them, parked, paved, assize, marketed, gas, watered and improved. That's quite a good thing for your tombstone, I think. Bradford, the 1850s, similar story. This is Sir Titus Salt, the first hipster of his era, and he's got a cappuccino or something on there. He became mayor of Bradford. He was owner of one of the big mills, and he got then to see the poverty in Bradford. Was just appalled at it. A Christian man. He got all his key guys around him, all the mill owners of Bradford, and said, we've got to do something about it. And to a man, they said no. They said no. So he thought, well, I'll do something about it. And then he built Saltaire at the time, which was the largest mill in Europe. But he didn't just build the mill, he built the education and the church and the housing and the park and everything like that as well. Because he said, people who work here and give to this have got to be honoured. That's a different way of thinking. So how can I affect, or the question I think probably comes to us, those of you who are church leaders, is how can I and my church affect the town? And the truth is you can't do it alone, can you? And you know that, really. Well, Sorry, some people don't know that actually. They arrive in town and they think they are God's gift to the whole city, and then whatever. Let's not go there. But you can't do it alone, can you? Sorry, it's ridiculous. We've got a fairly large church, Assemblies of God. God bless it. It's audacious in Manchester. It's about 3,500. It's 3 million in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, how big has it got to be to really have an effect? You can't do it alone. This is why I think this thing of what you're involved in, we call it unity movements or city gospel movements. I don't care what they're called actually, but it's an interrelationship between everybody in a city who owns the name of Christ and those God-fearers as well, by the way. The good people who don't really quite know Jesus, but probably in South Africa they'd be Christians. And it's the whole body for the whole city with the whole gospel. I love that phrase, actually.
It's good.
There's some debate about who actually coined it, whether it was Stott or whether it was Graham or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to own it. The whole body for the whole city with the whole gospel. As I look around the world, and I've been able to travel to a variety of different places, there are 3 core things that unite every single movement. And I'm talking from Fiji to America to Durban in South Africa, to parts of Nigeria, to the South Sea Islands, to Australia, to Hong Kong, to Dubai, and across Europe. You're part of a movement now, which has been under the radar for 20, 30, in some cases 40 years of what God has been doing. 3 things: relational, missional towards the city, and prayerful. You won't get it without the relationship. You just won't do it, because no one will trust each other. And if you don't trust each other, how can you really work together? It's got to be towards the city, because if all you do is keep in your kind of lovely relationship, then in a way you don't necessarily achieve much. But if you don't do it through prayer, then, sorry, it ain't happening. I was in Reading on Wednesday. They've prayed every Wednesday for 27 years. 27 years. That's incredible, actually, isn't it? I think the vision of transformation is spiritual. I think it's cultural. I think it's social. Please God, we plant more churches, we share faith, and we grow disciples. Please God. Please God, we care for the poor and the vulnerable. We stand up to social injustice and protect the environment. And then, please God, we see the changing of the patterns of how things are done around here, aiming for systemic change.
Yes.
And I think it is those 3 things, actually. I think that one's probably the hardest one, because you can change certain things, but if you don't change the culture, eventually it will change you. Our key assumptions, really, I think this is all about a network of networks. I think it's about friends coming together, just building relationships and just being good with each other, Manchester's a place of entrepreneurship, which tends to mean that it can be fairly competitive. But actually, over the years, God has built friends across the churches. And it's quite beautiful, really. When my wife was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, the city evangelist gives me a ring. He's not known for his pastoral care, by the way. And he goes, "Are you all right then?" I said, yeah, I'm all right. Right, that was the pastoral care bit, by the way. Right, we've had a whip round. I said, sorry? We've had a whip round. I've rung all the leaders, and as soon as Leslie feels a bit better, we're sending on holiday anywhere in the world. I've got tears in my eyes. He goes, see you then. Puts the phone down. He gets a fair amount of criticism, actually. But I tell you, don't get any from me. Because he's my mate. He's my mate. He stood with me. You remember who stands with you in a crisis, don't you? God bless him. We all have our part to play. It's really important. It's a jigsaw piece. We've all got a jigsaw piece to the bigger jigsaw for Oxford. And without your piece, it won't get finished. There's nothing worse than losing one piece at the end. Nothing worse than that. So you've got to play your part, but you're linked to others. You won't do it all. You're not the whole picture. Everybody is welcome. Those who are in the name of Christ, just come. Whatever. We'll work out all the stuff between us. But let's just try and be human together a bit more. We used to have a leader in Manchester that nobody really liked. He remained nameless. He's not there now. And I went to a party once, had all these leaders, and he was on his own, of course, because no one wanted to talk to him. I felt sorry for him, well, a little bit. And so I said, I thought I've got to do something, so I went and talked to him. I said, Dad, how was your week? I've had a vasectomy, he said. So we spent half an hour talking about vasectomies, and it kind of broke the ice, really, in a way. Just be human with each other, do you know what I mean? Just be human. I think it's good. We're all just part of a bigger kingdom network. This is the picture, isn't it? Together to reach the city. If we can get somewhere along this, we could be more strategic in our evangelism. We could be more strategic in our church planting. Not necessarily do it together, but at least find out who's doing what, when, where. We could eliminate some duplication. You don't need 3 food banks in the same street, even if the Holy Spirit has told you. You pray for each other. Operate as the largest. You are operating. We've been doing mapping, and you guys have been doing mapping, but we've been doing mapping. We just finished in Coventry. 100 churches provide 925 services to the community. The council were there with the family hubs. They have 8. The churches have 52. You are the largest provider of services outside the state. You will be. You will be. We're about to map the whole of Greater Manchester and try and prove that. And then we'll make a big song and dance of it, but that's what you are. And in some cases, you're bigger. So it's about having a bit of confidence, really, actually. And for goodness sake, operate as one network, because alone you're not. Alone you're one Anglican church with a toddler group and an elderly drop-in. But with 100 churches, that's a lot of drop-ins and a lot of toddler groups. In Oldham, we've just done a mapping. They connect with 50% of the under 5s of the whole borough. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Building relationships, living together in unity, speaking as one body to civic leaders. They want one phone number, guys. They really can't cope. They don't know the difference between you. We don't know the difference between us either. But, identify the gaps, look ahead and think, gosh, it wouldn't be good if we just got something happening in that area. Share best practice learning, because the learning you do in Oxford's for Oxford, because it's a unique place. You can get it from elsewhere, but it's very unique. And then, of course, the bigger picture around the spheres of business and arts and social action, education and media, and I think that's the bigger picture. And then you begin to see something really move, where relationships and prayer and mission to the city are all there. Why do we need city networks when I'm already overworked? This is to the pastors in the room, and you're thinking, oh, pig, it's Saturday morning, I want to have a rest. Firstly, there is theological importance to this, okay? But that probably doesn't drive you enough. To bring all things in heaven and earth together under Christ. That's what this is about. Oh, look at that. Ooh. And under Christ. Amen. So this is my son's sculpture. I just use it to do this, basically. I think there's a moral example to the world about this, about how to live with each other. Not perfectly, but at least, as I say, we're trying to go in the right direction. I think cities are vital to the nation. What is a nation if it's not its cities and its towns? What is a nation if it's not that?
That's right.
It's not some kind of amorphous thing. We think it's kind of sitting in Westminster. Please God, it isn't. It's a sum total. And actually in history, cities are more important than nations. It's city-states that actually created life. And I think this is a key thing. if you're part of this, you'll get support and encouragement. You will, because you'll be part of something bigger, and you'll make friends outside your own kind of networks. You will gain resources and learning, because you may have a thing to think, oh, I could start this, but I just don't have the volunteers. Well, actually, there's 4 or 5 churches over here who would love to be part of it, but they don't have a building. And then suddenly you've got something happening, haven't you? And you're helping each other. You will be more strategic and effective on your local ministry. You just will be, because you'll be thinking more about it in terms of what this is about. Discipleship now has a purpose. Discipleship's purpose is not ultimately to feed you as a church. Sorry, a bit of a shock for you. My daughter and son-in-law, he's a builder and she's a primary school teacher. When they tried to find a church in Warrington, it's like Christmas had come to every church they walked into. A primary school teacher and a builder. Okay? God must love us. Now they will serve, of course they will, but she's teaching at one of the worst schools in this country, and he's a young businessman. Get a bigger vision for them, please. Please get a bigger vision for them. Have a purpose. I think this whole thing is more interesting, stretching, and ambitious. And if you're getting bored in church life, get involved in this, because it will tax you, and you think, my gosh, this is really big. And then you think a year later, it's even bigger than I thought, and so on. I can take you to Mumbai, 1,200 churches working together as a Christian network across Mumbai. How do you do unity across a city of 25 to 27 million people? Indians tell you, you just divide the city into segments of 1 million. Dead easy. There are now 50 cities doing what you're doing here in Oxford across India, operating in intense persecution. One Voice York is phenomenal stuff. That's the old Archbishop with Graham Hutchins, the Elam Pentecostal, doing an open-air baptism covered by the BBC. Took them 2 years to work out the liturgy. Elam and the Baptists nearly gave up. Our theology is, if there's water, use it. And but now, after 27 years of praying together every Wednesday, similar to Reading, they have now said, why is there poverty in York? Why? There shouldn't be. It's one of the most well-heeled cities in the country. And yet there's 20% poverty. Could we, over the next 10 years, do something to change the dial on that? They're the largest provider outside the state. And they've got this audacious plan. It's ridiculous, actually. I like that, though. I can take you to the Netherlands, about 20 movements now across the Netherlands. I can take you to Toowoomba in Australia. There are about 70 movements in Australia. One lady particularly has got a vision to end pornography across the city. Ridiculous thinking. Well, unless you're in China, then you can stop the internet. But she said, I want to change the culture. Yeah. Because this is affecting women who are being violently attacked because of the hardcore pornography. This is the mayor who says, I will help create a city free of porn. I can take you to Nottingham, where they go loads of stuff together. I can take you to Fiji, where 75% of the women are sexually abused. And 75% go to church. Have a conversation about that. And they're having a conversation about that now, actually. I can take you to Cope, Coventry. We've just done this mapping, which I told you about. I can take you together for Berlin, and together for Hamburg, and together for Stuttgart, and together for Nuremberg. They're together. Oh, amazing. Praise God. Greater Manchester, the King of the North, God bless him forever, Andy Burnham, Catholic man, just commissioned us to map the whole of the faith groups working across his city, because he believes in collaboration. He will not change the city without collaboration. He's now got us on a call with 10 Metro Mayors of England. Isn't that amazing? He said, I think you're doing great. Could you join this call? I said, who's on the call? He said, all the Metro Mayors of England. Okay. The guy in Peterborough, well, I'll let Sian talk about NightLight Cafes in Lincoln. Southampton, they've just done a cost of living summit. Charlotte, America, they got more money than us. They're very good. I can talk you through transforming Teesside together, massive mission they did with the Palau organisation. 30,000 people turned up to a festival. Teesside Church, or the church community in Teesside, is probably between 1.5% and 2%. poverty like you've never seen before. The church is weak, but they had 50 concurrent Alpha courses this last autumn. They're not that weak, and they raised 350 grand. They didn't believe they could do it, but now they can. Done a bit of a shot in the arm. You can take it to Bristol, Cambridge and Peterborough. The mayor of Cambridge and Peterborough is on the call with Andy Burnham, and he says, I want the churches to work together. I said, well, I've been telling them to work together for ages, but they don't seem to want to. He said, tell them I want them to work together. So I told them, that your mayor wants you to work together. They go, yes, okay. So anyway, I can take you around the globe. Brothers and sisters, you're part of a bigger thing. And we're learning from each other. You're part of a movement, a new movement that's happening, which is less independent, please God. A little less arrogant about our denomination and what we can, we are God's gift to everything. It's about relationship and friendship, and it's about the place. It's a great thing to see a church renewed. It is a wonderful thing, and we need more of it, by the way. We need stronger churches, more community-based churches. But at the end of the day, I've been in Manchester 37 years, and I've got a feeling I'm not going to leave. I'm not sure I'm going to see the transformation, but I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot. It's really encouraged me over the years, actually. Perhaps my children will, and perhaps my grandchildren will, I don't know. Generational, actually. So if you're looking to make a mark on anything, don't get involved in this, because you'll be completely forgotten, because nobody will know you even done it. Because you'll be part of a group, you see. A team of people.
Very good.
Anyway, thanks.
Wow. I'm always inspired by when you're in your city and you're just cracking on with what God has told you to do, and then someone like Roger comes along and goes, look what's happening across the world. It just blows your mind, doesn't it? But it's always encouraging to know that God is on the move, and he has been for centuries. And I'm so excited just to share. Steve just invited us up just to share a little bit about what God's been doing in Lincoln. So I've been part of helping to lead the Transform Lincoln, the unity movement that's been happening in our city. And I'd love just to share a little bit from on the ground, having started from you never really start from scratch, because there's been decades of prayer, there's been decades of connection and relationship and evangelistic movements and different things like that. But then you come in and it's your little bit to tend the grass of where you are and what God has called you to do. And so we're Assemblies of God ministers, and we took on a church in 2005 in Lincoln. And we were busy working in deprived communities in the city. And there was this sense of, why do I not know what the other churches are doing? Why am I struggling here? And there's, literally 4-minute walk down the road, there's another church that's also struggling, and there's another church over there that's also desperately trying to do what God wants them to do. And so there was starting to be this gathering of can we please be more collaborative as churches? Can we please work together a lot more? And it was really driven by some incredible people in our city who had absolutely no time to make it happen. We've all got these great ideas, haven't we? But when we actually look at our time and our capacity, it's that sense of, how do we do this? And so I just want to take you through a little bit of a... can I choose this? Oh, there we are. Yeah. Great. Lovely. So there was some groundwork for decades. There were some brilliant missions that used to go on. And in 2015, Cinnamon Network came to us and said, could you do an audit of your city? What difference does the faith community make to the city? And that's all faiths, not just Christian faiths. At the time, our city wasn't massively diverse, so it was mainly the churches, really, that we were doing an audit of. And so we did this audit, and it was our way of peering out from our little churches and saying, who else is doing what? And it was a wonderful opportunity, and like you'd been doing your mapping as well. And so we were really excited, because it looked like, on paper, suddenly we were like, well, actually, we save our city millions of pounds because of all the services that we are providing. It was really great. And we put on a celebration event at the cathedral, because when you found out all these figures, you need to celebrate. And it wasn't in arrogance, it was more, let's appreciate what happens through the faith sector. And we invited the leader of our city council to the cathedral, and he was blown away by the figures. But he stood in front of all of us at the cathedral. And he said, this is absolutely wonderful, but if I want to partner with you, I have no idea where to come. We all sat there and went, yeah, you're right. Well done us, but we're a bit disorganised. And so we launched a series of breakfasts. We used to drag leaders out on Saturday mornings, promise them bacon and the sausage baps. Just come and have coffee. And it was really interesting because I started asking the question of them, what has been stopping us from unity? Look what they came up with. Quite a lot, really. There's been quite a lot. There's that sense of competition. There's a Lincoln mentality. My patch, our way, or the highway. Some churches don't have a clear mission plan, lack of confidence, protecting our own thing, lack of endorsement from leaders, poor relationships, resentment, jealousy, lack of trust and respect. Sometimes sausage and bacon baps aren't enough, are they? to deal with some of this. Lack of vision, conflict, tradition, history, sustainability, egos and agenda. That was huge. Concern over losing members. Ill-equipped leadership. Churches getting on board. And we're just too tired. That was a massive, resounding thing. And so there was this sense as we kind of met together and we prayed together and we said, what are the barriers? Let's be really honest. Let's just lay it out on the table. And then we start to ask the question, what are the benefits though? We completely need to acknowledge all of that. And actually we need to repent for all of that. We had this beautiful moment where we actually repented on one night where we were gathering to start our unity movement, and we repented of the pride in our city, which a prophet had come in and told us we had. You've got a real pride problem in this city. And there was this pub in Lincoln that he passed on his way into the city to tell us that we had a pride issue, and it was called the Pride of Lincoln, this pub. And he said, when I come back, I want to see the name of that pub changed, and I want to see the culture of the city changed. And on the 13th of November 2017, we met as a unity movement to launch our unity movement, and we just felt, just like at the last minute, let's just ask God for forgiveness for us doing it in our own way and for our pride. On that night, the pub changed its name.
Whoa.
To Windmill Farm. Wonderful. Yeah, goosebumps every time I think about that, because that's God, isn't it? That's God saying, come on, get with my programme. So there was all these incredible things. We could pool resources. There's synergy working together. We could have a louder voice, greater visibility, more authority in the city, one voice, one face, greater opportunities to serve. So many great things. And so off the back of these breakfasts, we kind of gathered a steering group. We launched what was the Greater Lincoln Active Faith Network, which is now Transform Lincoln. Friends, it is hard work. Because you are gathering people from different denominations. If you're going to be truly ecumenical, you know, it's great to work with your charismatic friends, because sometimes you think, actually, we know we speak the same language and all the rest of it. Actually, we wanted an ecumenical steering group that represented our Methodists, our Baptists. They're hard. No, they're not. The Anglicans were last to the table. So, you know, people get on board at different levels and different times, and depending on who's within the denominations as well. So we just had just this wonderful time of launching what this would look like. And we decided that actually we were going to look at 6 key areas within our city that were real pressing needs. So health and well-being, inclusion, children and young people, homelessness in the home, finance and employment, and food poverty. And it was that sense of, actually, if we can gather Christians around the table around these specific needs. We launched a video which talked about this, and we asked every single church to show it. And it said, please, if you have a passion or you work for any of these areas, we'd love to gather you around the table. Let's pray. Let's spend a year not starting any action and actually asking, what is already happening in the city? And what can we do? And what is God actually saying? What is he doing? So we decided that was how we were going to do it. And then we also launched the Civic Prayer Breakfast. I don't know if you've ever heard of Civic Prayer Breakfast. Do you do one in Oxford? No. We started these in 2017. York used to do one. Do they still do one? Yeah. Quite a few cities around. And we kind of learnt how to do a Civic Prayer Breakfast, gathering civic leaders and church leaders, or Christian leaders, into an environment where you pray for the well-being of the city. Early morning, 7 o'clock, you're inviting civic leaders to a civic prayer breakfast. And you're saying, we want to hear your challenges, we want to hear your hopes, and we want to pray for you as leaders. And I was so nervous to start this in 2017. I thought, well, how are we going to, who would even come? And it was amazing. The first time we had 70 in the room, and it was so incredible. And the civic leaders were going out, and one particular guy quite high up in the city council, he said, I'm not a man of faith, But I've got to say, he said, that has been the most inspirational morning I've ever been a part of. He said, because the church come, and it doesn't seem like you have like a big agenda. Your only agenda seems to be for the well-being of the city. And I'm so not used to that. And so it's just been our biggest voice into the city to say the church are here and the church are praying for you. And also, how can we partner? Here's your challenge. Well, let's look around the room. Who can partner to deal with some of those challenges? They've been absolutely incredible. Our 6 subgroups, some thrived and flew, some absolutely flopped. Just being totally honest. You know, it all depends on who you've got around the table and who can really spearhead things and run with things. There's some real activists in the homelessness and the home group. And so to say for a whole year we're not going to start any new projects, I was just reining them in. But yeah, it was really, really powerful. We created a 3-year action plan and then COVID absolutely blew it out the water. But actually, when we relook at that 3-year plan, we realise the church has already managed to do 60% of it anyway, without the strategic direction. It's amazing, isn't it? So I just want to share just a few kind of fruits, really. Oh, we turned into Transform Lincoln during COVID. We decided we needed a bigger vehicle than just social action. So to cover sectors, to cover prayer, to cover the active faith, to cover church relationships and to cover evangelism, and it spelt out space. So it was making space for God to do what he wanted to do in the city. So some of our fruits, and this is just to end with, and I'll just hand over in a moment, but so the Civic Prayer Breakfast, like I said, has been a real fruit for us. NightLight Cafes. We have, as we've done this over the last 10, 15 years, we have discovered that in your city you have seeds and you have weeds. You have things that God has been cultivating for generations, and you water those, and I don't know whether in Oxford maybe education is one of those seeds. For us it was mental health, which is really interesting. You may or may not know, but Samaritans was birthed out of Lincoln. Yeah, there was a parish priest up on our St Giles estate, and he's called Chadvara, and a young girl, 12 years old, took her own life because she started her period and nobody told her what that was. And so she thought, I'm dying. She took her life. And Chadvara said these words. He said, little girl, you have changed my life. And so from that point onwards, he said, I never want somebody to not have someone to talk to. And so he then moved to a different part of the country and then established Samaritans. But for me, it came out of the pain of Lincoln. And so as we water anything to do with mental health, it just explodes. And you think, wow, God has been doing something here for generations. We, as a health and wellbeing subgroup, we met together, we prayed, and we realised that our suicide rate in our city was nationally higher than anywhere else. And we said, this must break God's heart. It has to break our heart. What do we do with this? I'd had a dream back in the early days of my ministry that we had a light on in our church at night, and anybody could always find that light, like a lighthouse. And as I shared this with a group of 11 different churches sat around the table in that subgroup, 3 others said, I have had exactly the same dream. And so we said, one had it 5 years ago, one had it 7 years ago, I'd had it 10 years ago. And I'm like, God has been speaking to us all individually and waiting for us to get round the table and say, right, now what do you want to do? Because we're together. And so we said, wouldn't it be great if we partnered with the NHS and we could create that light in the night time? And so we went to the NHS and they were already talking about how do we establish this crisis cafe? What does this look like? We invited one of the commissioners to our Civic Prayer Breakfast in 2019. She came up to me afterwards. She said, that was all very interesting. She said, if you are going to do something to do with the crisis cafes, can you write me a proposal in the next 2 weeks of what resource you would need us to give you to make that happen? Wow. Yes, sir. I've never written a proposal for the NHS in my life. I've been serving on the mental health board for a number of years, but all the acronyms and the NHS speak, the language is just beyond me. And so I got together with the group and I said, what is God asking us to do? Anyway, it's been birthed into the NightLight Cafes. It's now a £500,000 contract with the churches. It's spread across the whole county of Lincolnshire. There's 35 NightLight Cafes going on. There's other cities and towns looking at how to launch NightLight. And it's just being one of those, here is God's creative solution to the cry of our city. And that's what he wants. He wants his people to hear the cry. And for him to say, right now, are you ready to move? Because I've got a plan and I've got all the resource you need. This is now, CAMS came to us 2 years ago. They said, we cannot deal with all the young people and their mental health. Our waiting list is 2 to 3 years. 16-year-old needs actual real help and they have to wait till they're 19, 20 to get help. What is that? So they said, could we launch NightLight for young people? So we came up with the idea of NightLight Cafe, and that's been piloted over the last 18 months. They're now ready to launch that county-wide because it's been amazing. The church working with CAMS, working with young people with mental health. In the last 2 weeks, we've launched the Beacon Cafe. Our county is massive for armed forces and veterans, and the mental health is chronic with veterans, and so the Beacon Cafe is specifically for those affected and involved in the armed forces, and that has literally been launched in the last, and that is all again funded by elsewhere, but it's God's plan and is stewarding all of that. Thirdly, we've had a community connector contract. So the NHS, they saw how we'd networked ourselves and they said, could you do that on a bigger scale across the city? And so now the NHS fund us to have 4 full-time community connectors. And that's the church being able to make those connections between health and third sector, and going into communities and saying, what is the need? Where are the inequalities? What is needed? What funding is needed? And so each of these community connectors has a budget. They have 25 grand a year to establish a hub in their areas. They have 15 grand a year to establish satellites, and they have 5 grand a year to... Again, it's that whole sense of the NHS going, we can't do this on our own. But the church seemed to have, they're the biggest voluntary organisation, and the church seemed to have this way of doing community well. One of our main NHS workers, she said to us, she said, church just doesn't seem to discharge people, does it? I was like, no. I'm now working on the 3rd generation of a family in our community that still has a lot of problems. You know, we don't do it. We do life with people. We move into communities and we don't leave. And it absolutely blows them away. So incredible. We've been able to do local asset transfers. The City Council have said, we've got this community building we don't know what to do with. So we're like, well, there's a church in that area. They need a building. Can we? So £500,000 was put into that to make that. And they've turned that into a beautiful cafe reaching into the north part of the city, which is like a spiritual desert land. So all of these building up this trust with civic leaders. Friends, we have to be ambitious, don't we? But not in that sense of, let us lead the way, but in that sense of, let us humbly just sit around the table and say to people, how can we serve our city? How can we serve what's going on? And then asking God, what is your plan? And then we're currently writing the poverty strategy for the city with the council and the NHS and the health sector, and we're launching Lincoln Against Poverty, which is amazing. There's a few things that I will pass on to David in a moment, just to share a little bit around kind of working with leaders from other denominations. But first of all, like, not everyone will be on board. They will get on the movement at different times, and that's okay. Ongoing relationship building with ministers moving on all the time can be quite hard. So you have, oh, great, we've got this brilliant minister and this, oh, they've left. Right, there's a new minister come in. Right, let's have a coffee with it. It's as you go on, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Creating a culture against disunity. We had a particular minister come into the city, and he started with one of his first preachers. He said, I will not work with any of the other churches that do not believe exactly what we believe. And that church did a lot of social action in our unity movement. And so they were saying to us, what do we do? And I said, we pray. That's all we can do. But I said, I personally walked around the building a few times. Within 2 years, he was gone. Because the culture of the city squeezed him out. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't us being heavy-handed, saying, you can't do that. Actually, it's just, let's just leave it to God. God's been doing something. Nobody can stand against that. Wonderful. I just want to pass on to Dave, and he can just share just for a few minutes before we do Q&A.
I think it might be helpful to everyone just to maybe understand a little bit of our context in Lincoln, and I'll just give you a few things to think through. I believe we've got some Q&A after this. Yeah. And so hopefully what I share now might just be helpful in some of those discussions. First of all, it's important to make the point that so Sian and I have been in Lincoln for 20 years, and even though in many ways you understand the concepts of when you have a couple, the couple will be referred to as leading the church, whilst that's very much true, operationally speaking, I would be referred to as a senior pastor, simply for the reason of the fact that, I chair the board, I lead the leadership team. The reason I say that is that our church in many ways, has released Sian to do a lot of the stuff that we're seeing. And so in many ways, even though she leads the church with me, on a day-to-day basis, on a hands-on basis, she's been taken out of that in order to do this. She doesn't do that on top. And there's a sacrifice that comes from doing that. Yeah. And I was just thinking about this word tension. We so often think of the word tension in a negative context, don't we? We don't often think of the word tension in a positive way. But when we understand the principle of tension, it's tension that always brings fruit. So think about playing sport, for example. If your tennis racket didn't have tension, you wouldn't be able to hit the ball properly. But the process of tension is the concept of two things being pulled in opposite directions. If your guitar this morning wasn't wound tight, it wouldn't produce the sound that you need it to. So tension provides fruit, but tension is painful and tension is complex because you often have seemingly opposing concepts being pulled in opposite directions, but it's in that process that provides the fruit. And what I wanted to do here, just paint a picture for you to help you understand how everything that we're talking about today, there is tension in the middle of all of that, but it's a tension to be managed. I think it's really important for us to understand and for people not to mishear anything that's already been said this morning. I love what Roger shared about place. You know, from my perspective as a church leader and for everyone in this room, there are three primary facets, I believe, to what we do that are different, but if we understand them correctly, they complement each other. But the reality is they don't always play nicely with each other because they're different and they sometimes have different agendas. So you and I in this room, we are called by Jesus Christ to our local church. And the fact that we're involved in city unity doesn't lessen the fact that we're called to our local church. It's a different, but we are called. And when I was just writing down some notes as you were talking, Roger, and I came up with 3 P's. And these P's they aren't the only thing that represent each facet, but they would be the primary one. So when I think of local church, I think of the word people. So as a minister of Jesus Christ, I'm called to serve people that I'm to steward that God has given to me, and the primary outworking of that is the local church. I'm there to disciple the people that God has given me. I'm not primarily called to disciple people in someone else's church in Lincoln. I might influence them and I might help them in some way, but I'm not called to disciple those people because the letters that Paul wrote were letters to local churches, leaders leading local people. So you and I are called to our local church to disciple the people, but we are also called, and I love the theology of place, I love that, we are called to our city. And that's not necessarily about the people, although people are involved in that. It's about the place. So we are called to people, we are called to place, but also, unless you are part of an independent church, we are also called to a network or a denomination. You know, I am an Assemblies of God minister, and if I don't see a purpose in that, not just what I receive from the denomination, but what I give into the denomination, if I see no purpose in that, what would be the point of me being part of it? But I understand there is a point, and it's slightly different to those things. So I would describe that as empowerment. We understand the concepts of the tribes of Israel. I would see that as my tribe. And by being part of a denomination, that empowers me to be a better minister or a better leader, and empowers the people that work alongside me to lead. But these 3 things don't always play nicely with each other, because we don't always think we have the time to do all 3. Yeah. And they are tensions. And my encouragement to us, particularly in these conversations, is lean into the tension. Don't bury your head in the sand and go, well, there are no conflicts. Let me tell you, friends, there are. But that's okay to name it. That's okay to say, well, how can I possibly lead a local church, be involved in city movement, be involved in... How can I possibly make that work? Well, there are sacrifices. So, for example, the one sacrifice that we've already shared is some people in our church might look and say, why are we giving Sian away? That might be their mentality. We've given her away, And I could look at it in terms of my responsibility to church and go, well, if Sian did less of this, this and this, our church would benefit more. And there might be an element of truth to that. But sacrifice, you reap what you sow. And so I think for me, in any conversation, I'm sure there'll be other things we talk about, I strongly encourage us all, lean into this. Don't bury your head in the sand. Don't act as if it doesn't exist, because it does. And actually by naming it and actually going, well, what are the challenges of this? What are the challenges of being, committed is a very general term, but committed to your local church as well as committed to your city? What are the challenges of that? And I think the biggest thing for us is, and I think this is where we sometimes fall into the trap, is we have these conversations as leaders and we don't always take our churches on the journey. And they are in the dark. And one of the things that we've worked really hard at Bridge is the hope would be that if you spoke to someone in our church, they might not be able elaborately to kind of clearly to elaborate on this, but they'll be able to articulate, I believe, why we do local, why we as a church are involved in the city, and why as a church our leaders serve our denomination, because hopefully they are benefited by us growing by being part of our denomination. So take your churches on the journey of this as well, and let's make sure that these aren't always just conversations we have as leaders, because our churches are very much a part of this equation. So hopefully that helps you. But like I said, the biggest thing for me is lean into the tension, because the tension itself isn't bad, it's just a tension to be managed.
So we've got some time for can I get all three of you up, please? Is that right? Time for some Q&A. We're heading towards coffee at around 11. We've got a bit of time to ask questions that everyone can hear answers to, and then a bit of time over coffee. I don't know if you've looked at one of the bits of paper that's on the chair near you, but that's telling you where we're going this morning. After coffee, I'm going to just share a snapshot of where I think we're up to currently together in the city of Oxford. Vicky's going to share an update from the mapping project that's going on, and then we're going to have an hour to talk together. We'll get into some smaller groups, and Vicky's actually going to prime your pump with some things to discuss. We're going to come back together then to hear about an update from Safe Families, which merits our prayers as well, and then pray to finish the morning. So that's where we're headed. But first of all, a chance for some questions to be answered. Who'd like to ask what? Oh yeah, Anne and then Dave. Yeah, it'd be great.
It's not much of a prejudice, because it's been a desire for a long time. There are cafes around Oxford, but when I lived in Yorkshire, Halifax could have been part of that as well with Bradford, because a guy had a vision years ago where there was statistics for suicide in England. This was girls' rates going out of nightclubs and so somebody had this idea to turn a cafe into a night shelter, and they liaised with the police, the ambulance service, and they were known as street angels.
Oh yes.
I think
yeah,
you got the
I've heard
idea
that.
from America, so and it was just a simple idea, but again, once the churches work together, which is where this is all key, and everyone's speaking, and it seems to be finally happening in Oxford. And like you say, get all that differences to one side, let's all focus on what is needed.
Absolutely.
I mean, you made it sound really simple.
It's really not. Sorry, I did that.
Oh, no, but you had time.
Yeah.
You had a time restriction, but I mean, I can see that happening here in Oxford. Steve is in connection with the county council. I mean, like you say, working with them, funding. And each time I go into the city, I think there's so many empty shops now.
Yes.
That would make a great move for a cafe.
Yeah.
Come on, because it ticks so many boxes. You can bring the homeless, the drug addicts,
Absolutely.
the lonely. It's everybody that was mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's not so much a question as I'm just feeling passionate about.
So I don't know if that would have picked up on here. So if I could just summarise for the sake of whatever we do with the recording, really just Anne's just expressing a passionate vision there for what cafes can do, having had experience of them in Halifax. So do you want to add anything more to that?
I think there's a power in the gathering, isn't there? And again, churches are just really well placed to do that. The whole coined the phrase kind of well-being cafe has really kind of taken off nationally in a way, especially post-COVID, where people were locked away in their houses and needed to come out. And so I just think as soon as churches start gathering together, and it's about people really hearing that cry. For me, it's them kind of softening to that and then saying, well, what can we do? We should do something. What should we do together? I think it's very scary when you're on your own in one church saying this is what we need to do, but actually when you've got a gathering and you suddenly go, oh gosh, we had in that conversation around NightLight Cafe, we had a Christian GP, we had a Christian psychologist, and we were saying, well, people needed mental health first aid course. Well, that's £350 a person. How do you do that? And they said, we could just create our own course. We've got the know-how. I'm like, wow, there's so much gold in our church. And we just need to release it, don't we? And so, yes, the gathering, isn't it? And God bringing the right people around the table.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Question two questions, if that's allowed. First one is for Sian. You had, on one of your slides, you had that light bulb, and I think you were listing your subgroups or thematic groups.
Yeah.
I would be interested if you could just describe how you came about those
Topics.
being the groups and those topics. And the reason that I ask is that, as you were saying it sounded not dissimilar to a local authority's corporate plan, or indeed like a health and wellbeing strategy for a county, having written a couple of those documents myself. So I was just interested in how did they arise as your themes?
Well, our ecumenical steering group who'd been gathered, they were all church leaders, Christian leaders of organisations in themselves, but they'd all worked with the council in many ways. So again, we were looking at what are some of the key areas that we've picked up from our own environments in terms of what are the needs, and then where do we feel like we can gather around. I think it's really important, once we had this booklet which said, actually after a year of consultation, and we used the Discovery course which Tear Fund had created, which was around, and it's now been turned into 5D by Andy Frost and Simon Hawking, which is a really useful tool for community development and just listening to the community. After a year of conversation, to have this booklet where we said, actually around these 6 topics, this is what we feel like the church's unique contribution could be. In every council meeting and NHS meeting, we could take those booklets and go, just love to share this with you. And we're putting it out there because it's quite scary to do that as well, because you're hoping the church can really make it happen. But it kind of, the themes actually came from all of the work within the city that had already happened over the last 10 years. We just said, these are the 6 that we really want to concentrate on. And out of those 6, probably 4 really took off.
In Bolton, they have... the council came up with Passion for Bolton, and they had their own. At the same time, the churches were working out their vision, and they go, well, why don't we just do that? We'll add on evangelism, prayer, and church planting, but we'd have to tell them about that. But why go? Why cut against the grain? Really, just go with what's happening. I really would advise that. It doesn't matter how you segment it. Every place will be slightly different, but just go with what you have. Otherwise, then that enables your language and your connections to be much better, I think. Unless what they have produced is not good. And we're working with one city at the moment who is producing a poverty strategy, which is dreadful, really dreadful. And we said to the churches, you need to get involved now, because you've got nothing about relational poverty in there whatsoever. It's all about economic poverty, and that's not one of the major drivers, Well, it is, but it's not the only thing about poverty. So.
Do you have another?
Well, yeah, the other question was then, I think, Roger, you said about your provocation was for the church to be more confident, and how large a network we are. And Sian, you said about the leader of the city council saying, how do I engage with you? I need one. So are those the 2 barriers? Like I suppose, so just reflecting on those comments, what are the barriers between church and civic kind of leadership coming together for the good of the city? Is it those 2 things? Is it others?
Historically, you get an anti-Christian thing happening sometimes. Used to. Pre-COVID. Nowadays you don't, because they run out of money and they don't run out of ideas. And they really don't care what you do. Really. Every now and then you touch on it. There's a couple of boroughs in Manchester that got that old kind of flavour to it. So mostly they kind of go with you, really, I think, which is encouraging. So what was the...
So it was just kind of what are the barriers?
The barriers, yeah.
If they are, how have you overcome them?
One barrier is they think the church does some good stuff, is a bit amateur and a bit small. Mapping blows that out of the window. You are not amateur, you are not small. We are 40 times the outlets at McDonald's. You know, in asking the health service, asking a question across Lincolnshire, well, where are you? Well, everywhere. Well, they go, well, what do you mean everywhere? Well, literally everywhere. Every village, every little town, there's a church. That is phenomenal reach. So I think it's about having confidence, not pride, because what they don't want to be done is told that somehow what they're doing is bad, because it's not. I've worked in my borough council for many years, and they do some phenomenal stuff, and I've learned a lot from them actually.
But also, just to add to that, Roger, I think the flip side of the coin is the reality. Sometimes churches are amateur. Sometimes we have been, and I think over the last decade, especially, church leaders have had to learn to just get better. You know, I did a master's in 2018 on organisational management, because you are leading an organisation, and I think sometimes that accusation has been true. We have been, what we've produced has been great, but sometimes giving money, so we receive almost £1 million a year now, they have to trust that you can manage that well. And I think sometimes churches have not shown that we can do that. And so I think there has been an upskilling that has helped some of that as well.
Other questions? Yeah.
I'm interested how, like you say, in Bradford, you work with Muslim community.
Yes, a number of our cities do. They work in an all-faith context, but they work in a church context, in an all-faith context, and in a civic context. And you've got to, it's one of those tensions actually, you've got to, in areas where there is a high proportion of other faiths, you've got to work together. Anyway, you should work together, because at least you've got faith in common. And certainly in Manchester, the mapping we will do across the whole will be all faith mapping. So I found somebody who knows all the Gurdwaras, and thank goodness for that. And we've got obviously a number of different faiths, but that's really important. Although some faith groups only deliver their services for people in the faith group. And the council's really kind of not quite interested in that. What they're interested in is those who go beyond. Like the Hindus and Sikhs, they will feed and do a lot of good work. So.
When we were setting up the Active Faith Network in the first place, the Methodist district really wanted to make it all faiths as our faith network. And my point was, Jesus really has to be at the heart of this, or I'm not really interested in being part of it. But it's then, how do we then relate with the other faiths? And I think that's been the beauty of Transform Lincoln, how we've been able to kind of come alongside. Our Muslim population has gone from 800 probably about 20 years ago up to, it's probably up to nearly 8,000-9,000 now, so it's grown quite rapidly. And so our relationship with our Muslim population is really important to us, because we have to be able to also then just share the fact that we're people of faith when there's things that challenge us as faith groups in a city, the education, some of the things that we've not agreed on, and some of the curriculum around kind of sex education at a very young age and things like that. We realise actually when we join with the Muslims, we have a great voice, and some of the whole kind of freedom of religion around the whole kind of gay marriage and things like that. There's some things that we can really join together on and have a strong voice in terms of how we've been forced by society to do certain things and be certain ways. So yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. But then knowing that actually our network and what God is doing is with Jesus at the centre, but in relationship with others as well when needed.
We in Greater Manchester is an initiative we're taking, and one of our denominations took a very bad dislike to this initiative. Won't go there, but the Muslims supported us, the rest of the churches, and told them not to be so stupid, and so that was great.
Memory.
So my question is regarding diasporic-led churches. How have you managed to draw them into what you're doing, if at all? And are there any barriers, to getting, diasporic-led churches to be involved in this?
I was going to ask the same question.
Okay.
Sorry,
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question of diaspora churches, so people who've moved from elsewhere in the world and are doing a brilliant job
good
of leading
question.
churches here, gathering churches here, how particular issues involved in gathering those
Yeah.
churches into this movement.
That's difficult. It's not easy, and I'll answer it, in one sense, I'll answer it in a broader question, a broader answer. You never deal with culture just once. It's an ongoing thing, and so it's a little bit like, how many times do you have to mow your lawn? Well, all the time. You mow it all the time, and so culture, I think it's. I have to be very careful how I say this. That, there is a culture that you fight for in your town, and so even though I'm dark skinned, I am very British. So I'm not from another culture. So what I mean when I say that is, when people come from other cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things. One of my reflections might be, and if this is wrong, correct me, that sometimes when groups come in from other places, there's less of a initial tendency to want to do stuff, and I think we have to not be afraid to challenge that, because I think sometimes the attitude is, if you challenge it, you're coming across as being prejudiced or whatever. I think there's got to be a braveness about challenging it, but within a context of relationship, and so that stuff hasn't been easy in Lincoln, but you never stop working at that, and I think the only way you do build that is relational. And I think one of the things with Sian on the timeline that she didn't have time really to talk into was the stuff before the action really kicked off, the relational stuff, even though she hardly mentioned it because of time. That was huge. And there was a lot of background relationship building over years before a lot more of the action stuff kicked off. But I would say that stuff, it can only come through relationship.
Yeah, has to be.
There are some barriers about when, particularly African leaders or other, they often have jobs during the day, midweek, and then church leaders, white ones, want to meet during the week, and so you get all that. You just have to work very, very hard at it, and never give up on it. I like the illustration about cutting your lawn. You wish you could give up on the lawn, but you can't. But actually, it does take time, and there's a lot of institutional stuff, a lot of cultural stuff. We had the leaders of our largest black church African church in Manchester around for a meal. They've been in the city 10 years, never invited into a white person's house. 10 years. I was shocked by that, really. Felt, I should have done this a bit earlier. So you are working with that. We do have a guy nationally working on this, on intercultural kind of work, a guy called Asobo. He's worked at the Barber Society. There's a big conference in Manchester in January on this issue. They've had 2 or 3 other conversations about it, but it is a growing conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally. Because I came in, having that same kind of, can I say, isolated, like we're doing our ministry and we're doing our own thing, but getting links and the relationships as they grew, within the city, I began to think outside the box, not just our church, but actually thinking about, this is the place that God has called us, and we need to spread our wings outside just our own culture and people. And so I'm quite cognizant, and probably I'll say this for some, that there are a lot of leaders that are out there in a similar position, but they'll need people that will be able to reach out to them, and also creating the environment and also the opportunities for them to be able to connect. Like we're saying, I also work a full-time job. The things that I do is like, I don't even know how I do it. So,
and yet you're here on a Saturday morning talking about unity, which is
having
incredible.
those conversations and opportunities to say, look, can we have some meetings in the evening when you guys have finished work? And then let's have those that can do in the afternoon or during the day too. And then mixing those kind of dynamics will allow those platforms to be available and those people to connect.
Maybe I'm wrong with this, and tell me if I am. My understanding is some of it is a theological issue. My understanding in speaking to quite a few African pastors would be they would probably have less of a theology on place and more of a theology around people. So it's not so much where you're based, it's to affect the place, it's about the people that you're trying to reach. I think sometimes that might be a bit of a barrier. Possibly.
And I'd observe that, I mean, whatever cultures people come from, people who have moved nations by that experience of having left place often have less of a sense of rootedness in a place than compared to people who lived here and this has been the place they've own place they've lived. So there is a difference of emphasis, I think, just from that own life experience alongside culture. What if we could take a last question from Anne?
Oh, listening to Roger, when you were speaking and saying, it's lovely in Oxford, yes it is, but having brought my child up here in Oxford and lived in a disadvantaged community, having to have transformation happen in that community, because there are all the other things that you've expressed in Manchester have been happening here in Oxford. We have some really strong disadvantaged communities here, and primarily the ethnic minority are the ones that are placed in those communities, and so we experience a lot of different things, as well as lots of inequality across everything in our workplaces and everything like that as well. So, but I'm glad for Renew Oxford, and I've been coming every year to this. And also the work that was done in the area that I lived in, I was also part of that enabling of transformation in that area. So seeing it now, but the young people, what I've seen is that now they're up at like 24 and 25, there is a well-being issue within them all because of the way that they've been brought up in those communities.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm keen to leave time for coffee, which is back through the way. Just before I say go, can I grab these, Roger?
Yeah, please.
There's a whole pile of them down here. The Gather Movement do a brilliant job of sharing good knowledge and best practice. And of the different things, I wanted to draw your attention to this hexagon. It's in the back of this booklet, which lists off 6 things that have been seen to be really helpful drivers for the kind of city transformation movement we've been talking about. And I'm going to pick up on those a little bit after the coffee break. So if you'd like to just talk to people, great, talk to people. If you'd like to have a look at that, we'll pop these on the table across the way, and that will feed a little bit into what happens after coffee. But I've said coffee so many times in the last minute. It's time to go and find it. Or tea, indeed.